Earlier this year, James Callaghan was elected as the new leader of the Labour Party and became Prime Minister. Throughout a very difficult and challenging time, both inside and outside of Parliament, Jim has shown outstanding qualities of statesmanship, judgment, courage and integrity. And I have very much pleasure indeed in calling on the Prime Minister, our leader James Callaghan, to present his first parliamentary report.
Mr. Chairman, comrades, it is indeed an honour to stand before you today as leader of our party and to present to you the report of the Parliamentary Labour Party. And my first words must be a tribute to the man who led us for 13 years, in good times and in bad, never faltering and never losing heart. He led us into 5 elections and he won 4 of them. Now he's decided to retire from the leadership, but not from active public life, unchallenged and finally undefeated. The Conservatives never could master him. Indeed, to tell you the truth, I think the National Executive gave him much more trouble than the Tories ever did. But quite apart from his well-known qualities as an outstanding party leader and a long-to-be-remembered Prime Minister, countless rank-and-file members in our movements whose names will never hit the headlines know him as a man for his personal kindliness, for his complete lack of self-importance, and for his generosity. He is, in a true sense of the word, a comrade. I hardly know which of his many achievements will rank highest. But if he were asked, and I haven't asked him, I have a suspicion that he would place among the things he really values his success in overcoming opposition and doubts and carrying through to a permanent place in our educational system, the Open University. All of us in public life, whether it be the ward secretary or whether it be the Prime Minister, knows that he can't do his best work unless he has the continuous, unfailing support and understanding of his wife. Any tribute to Harold would be incomplete without us expressing our affection and our thanks to Mary also. Harold and Mary, Harold and Mary, the conference salutes you both. Now, this annual report, I'm bound to warn you from now on, will miss his whiplash and his wit. All I can do is to follow his electoral example, lead you to victory in 4 elections out of the next 5. All aspirants to the party leadership, look out. There now exists a broad framework of tolerance and comradeship in the party. Differences of opinion, strongly held, there will be, and they will be passionately argued this week. But in a democratic socialist party, there is no monopoly of revealed truth. Each of us knows he's got something to learn from the other. Let me start by expressing my sincere appreciation, and I ask conference to do so too, to my ministerial and parliamentary colleagues for their unflagging hard work during the last year without a majority. It's been a tough year. For long months we governed without an overall parliamentary majority at all. Sometimes We had to rely on colleagues who should have been in hospital or at home in bed, risking their health, to be present in the House of Commons to see that Labour's programme is carried through. And you know it has been carried through. Take this session's parliamentary bills. Shipbuilding, nationalisation, aircraft, nationalisation, tide cottages, comprehensive education, pay beds, all straight out of the manifesto, all opposed line by line by the Tories, all fought for in the House of Commons by the Parliamentary Labour Party. Sometimes, you know, I think those who ask us to stick to the manifesto are a little selective in their reading about what it contains. It was a collective and a united effort. But let me thank the two men all through who had the final responsibility of making sure that the members were always, or at least almost always, in the right place at the right time, the two Chief Whips, Bob Mellish and Michael Cox. Comrades, there's a line of poetry, a good line of poetry for socialists, even if it wasn't intended to be. A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? And while our conference will constantly reach towards new territory, it gives us also a chance to put into perspective what we have done. I ask you all to look at the outstanding checklist that was reproduced in Labour Weekly a few weeks ago. The remarkable thing is not what we've failed to do, but how much has been carried out before we reached even the halfway stage of this Parliament. Nor were we elected on a false or a fake prospectus. Let me remind those who wish us to stick to the manifesto what its opening words were. Britain faces its most dangerous crisis since the war. The manifesto went on to describe the worst world recession since the 30s, the five-fold increase in oil prices, an ever-narrowing industrial base, and a level of economic performance which had been in steady decline compared with our major competitors for almost a generation. It's all there to read, the most dangerous crisis since the war. We followed a government whose failure to understand the trade unions and led them into conflict and confrontation, and which inevitably crashed in the chaos of a three-day working week. Labour was elected to heal that terrible wound which Tory obstinacy inflicted on the nation, to replace conflict by partnership, confrontation by cooperation. We knew this was the only way for the country. The British people knew it. Our critics at home and our friends abroad knew it. Even the Tories in their own hearts knew it. There is no better way. So we repealed the Industrial Relations Act. We passed into law the new Trade Union and Labour Relations Act. We passed an act to protect employment. We put on the statute book an act to safeguard health and safety at work. We've established the new advisory, conciliation and arbitration service for both sides of industry to use. Taken together, Mr. Chairman and comrades, these measures have given us a framework for industrial relations which has enabled us to rebuild confidence between the trade unions and the government. It has served Britain well. Consider the improvement in relations on the workshop floor. The number of days lost through industrial disputes this year is the lowest for any comparable period since 1967. The number of disputes is lower than at any time since 1953. That should be the headline news. That's what the world should be hearing about Britain at a time when our foreign competitors and, even more important, our customers are ready to believe the worst. I say to the world that this government has created an industrial framework based on voluntary methods that can serve as a model to anyone throughout the rest of the world. It should be used. We can't afford not to. But industrial relations isn't just a matter of avoiding strikes, important as that is. That's a negative approach. Britain's present economic position demands a positive approach. a new spirit of cooperation in industry. Yes, cooperation between employers and trade unionists, changes of attitudes on both sides. And as I go around, and I do a lot more these days than I used to, I find more and more active trade unionists, not the theoreticians, but active trade unionists on the shop floor, recognizing that they share a joint responsibility in their place of work. And the ordinary worker is getting more and more outspoken in his opposition to the small bands of disruptors in industry. And where management is enlightened, it too sees the need to change its attitudes. Theirs not to reason why is no more a recipe for industrial success than it was for military. Now, we look for further progress on two fronts. First, the government is awaiting the report of the Bullock Committee on Industrial Democracy. When I visited the Federal Republic of Germany a little earlier this year, Chancellor Helmut Schmidt arranged a meeting which I could attend between members of the Bullock Committee, which included some delegates to this conference, notably Jack Jones and Clive Jenkins, as well as David Lee of the TUC and others, and their German opposite numbers, who have already 25 years' experience of workers' participation. Now, the Bullock Committee will reach its own conclusions and present them to the government, but I want to say that I came away from that meeting with the German Chancellor and the representatives of German employers and German workers convinced that the introduction of a system of industrial democracy into British industry must be given high priority by the government when the Bullock Committee is reporting. Second, we would like to see much faster progress on the question of planning agreements. So far, there's a marked reluctance on industry's part, on the management's part, to enter into planning agreements. Perhaps it's a reflection of theirs but to do and die mentality that I've referred to. Now, some people, I've heard it expressed here, would like to see these agreements made compulsory. I'm always a little dubious about the long-term success of shotgun marriages. We have to convince the management of our larger firms and industries that planning agreements are in their interest too, that they will be a major factor in encouraging the productivity and efficiency so vitally need. Our offer of cooperation extends to industry also. Now, Mr. Chairman, comrades, it's not by accident that I decided to begin this report by discussing the government's attitude to industrial relations and industrial cooperation. Nor have I done so just in order to show what a hash the Conservative government made of it. I start with this because until there is agreement on the place of the human being in our industrial society, we shall push and pull at the economic levers in vain. We've expected too much from the economic mechanisms, and we've paid insufficient attention to the most important component of all, the human element. The worker's relationship with his tools, his integration with his working environment, is the most important unresolved problem in our complex industrial society today. We have a people who are better educated, better informed, who have escaped from the deference of my youth, and who now look to government, to employers, and to the trade unions to provide a framework and an environment that befits their higher status. This conference decided again yesterday, 2.5 years after our election, that there is still no better way forward than the social contract to give life to this concept. And that is as true for the employers as it is for the workers. Does any employer nowadays assert, if he ever did, that he preferred the days of Tory confrontation? Does anyone believe that unemployment would be brought down faster under the Tories? Does anyone think that with their sorry record of conflict, the Tories could have halved the inflation rate over the last year? Does anyone know what Tory economic policy really is? Do they advocate Ingham's policy or a free-for-all? Which is it? Either, neither, or both? No one knows. Does anyone know whether the Tories would reflate or deflate? They talk of cutting government spending. Does anyone know what more they would cut if they told us? They talk of cutting taxes. Whose taxes? Well, perhaps we can guess. But have they told us? Do we know? Would the tax cuts be larger or smaller than the spending cuts? Would the budget deficit be larger or smaller? Does anyone know? Does anyone know how they will work with the trade union movement? Do they want to return to the conflicts of 1973? Or do they now say we too will work the social contract? No one knows. But how can a Tory party even offer a social contract to the trade unions when it is pledged to the social policies and inequalities which strike at the roots of our own movement? No. The social contract stands confirmed yesterday for the next 3 years because there is no other way, and it demands complete cooperation between the party, the government and the unions. That doesn't mean, when I say there's no other way, that it's going to be quick or easy. That's been promised before. It is neither. Britain has lived for too long on borrowed time, borrowed money, borrowed ideas, and we live in too troubled a world to be able to promise that in a matter of months, or even in a couple of years, that we shall enter the promised land. The route is long and hard, but the long march has at last begun, and I hope to lead you at least some part of the way with the social contract and the industrial strategy as our guides. For too long, perhaps ever since the war, we've postponed facing up to fundamental choices and fundamental changes in our society and in our economy. That is what I mean when I say we've been living on borrowed time. For too long, this country, all of us, yes, this conference too, has been ready to settle for borrowing money abroad to maintain our standards of life instead of grappling with the fundamental problems of British industry. Governments of both parties have failed to ignite the fires of industrial growth in the ways that countries with very different political and economic philosophies have done. Germany, France and Japan. Different countries, different philosophies. We've failed whichever they adopted. We are, as you know, still borrowing money. This time, we're not borrowing if the government continues on its present course to pay for yet another short-lived consumer boom of the kind which used to buy success at the polls, or so we were told, but which never bought success in the world's markets or at the workplace. We are borrowing now partly to pay for our huge investment in the North Sea. We are borrowing too because our other industrial nations volunteer credits so that our strategy and our proposals for regenerating British industry need not be thwarted by short-term speculative movements of sterling balances, a load we've still been unable to shed. We are determined that this borrowing will be used to act and to press on with the task of rebuilding a regenerated manufacturing industry. This time, we are not going for a consumer boom on borrowed money. We're going to invest it in our future. The cosy world, which we were told would go on forever, where full employment would be guaranteed by a stroke of the Chancellor's pen, cutting taxes, deficit spending, that cosy world is gone. Yesterday, delegates pointed to the first sorry fruits, a high rate of unemployment. The rate of unemployment today, there is no need for me to say this to you, cannot be justified on any grounds, least of all the human dignity of those involved. But, Mr. Chairman and comrades, I didn't become a member of our party, even less did I become the leader of our party, to propound shallow analyses and false remedies for fundamental economic and social problems. When we reject unemployment as an economic instrument, as we do, and when we reject also superficial remedies, as socialists must, then we must ask ourselves unflinchingly, what is the cause of high unemployment? Quite simply and unequivocally, It is caused by paying ourselves more than the value of what we produce. There are no scapegoats. This is as true in a mixed economy under a Labour government as it is under capitalism or under communism. It's an absolute fact of life which no government, be it left or right, can alter. Of course, in Eastern Europe, you can't price yourself out of your job because you can't withdraw your labour. So those governments can at least guarantee the appearance of full employment. That isn't, I understand, the democratic way. We used to think that you could spend your way out of a recession and increase employment by cutting taxes and boosting government spending. I tell you in all candour that that option no longer exists, and that insofar as it ever did exist, it only worked on each occasion since the war by injecting a bigger dose of inflation into the economy on every occasion, followed by a higher level of unemployment as the next step. Higher inflation followed by higher unemployment. We've just escaped from the highest rate of inflation this country has known. We have not yet escaped from the consequences of the high unemployment. That's the history of the last 20 years. And each time we did this, the twin evils of unemployment and inflation have hit hardest those least able to stand them. No, not those with the strongest bargaining power. No, it hasn't hit those. It's hit the poor and the old and the sick, and we have struggled as a party to try to maintain their standards and indeed to improve them against the strength of the free collective bargaining power that we have seen exerted as some people have tried to maintain their standards against this economic policy. Now we've got to get back to fundamentals. First, overcoming unemployment now unambiguously depends on our labour costs being at least comparable to those of our major competitors. Second, we can only become competitive by having the right kind of investment at the right kind of level and by significantly improving the productivity of both labour and capital. Third, we will fail, and I say this to those who have been pressing about public expenditure, which I'll come back to again, we will fail if we think we can buy our way out by printing what Dennis Healey calls confetti money to pay ourselves more than we produce. I don't care what economic system we live in. At least I do care very much. But the moral I want to draw is this. I hope no Trotskyites get any comfort out of that. I don't care in this sense that whatever system we live in, whatever system we live under, these fundamentals are at the heart of the standard of life of the people of the country concerned, and we ignore them at our peril. They are also at the heart of the social contract and of our industrial strategy. Britain is now at a watershed. We have the chance to make real and fundamental choices about priorities, which are absolutely necessary to achieve a growing and prosperous manufacturing industry with all the advantages and easements that can follow. Let me be quite clear. If we didn't possess the social contract and an industrial strategy that has been agreed between the government and employers and trade unions, with all the socialist measures that are involved in that contract and in the industrial strategy, these together, if we did not possess this, then we would have no chance of forging a powerful British economy in the next decade. But we are getting cooperation on these issues. The manifesto was right when it said that the first priority of a Labour government must be a determined attack on inflation. This remains. We've halved it in the last 12 months, but we must do more yet. The government's objective must be to reach inflation rates comparable with those of our major competitors by the end of next year. We are already getting there. The regeneration of British industry has begun. The National Enterprise Board is in place and is in business. The Industry Act is working. The detailed examination of the 39 main sectors of British industry by employers and trade unions together has produced agreed reports on what is needed. Agreed reports on what is needed in each sector in the matter of new plant, new machinery, better use of existing plant, proper design, innovation, good marketing, after-sales services, increased training and skilled manpower to avoid bottlenecks. We know what needs to be done. Industry knows what needs to be done. Will both sides of industry now go through with it? If so, then we are at the beginning of a new era that will expand our so far dwindling manufacturing base. Let me add one more thing about how to get a strong manufacturing sector of industry. And hold on to your seats. The willingness of industry to invest in new plant and machinery requires, of course, that we overcome inflation, but also that industry is left with sufficient funds and has sufficient confidence to make the new investment. When I say they must have sufficient funds, I mean they must be able to earn a surplus. And that's a euphemism for saying they must be able to make a profit. And whether you call it a surplus or a profit, it's necessary for a healthy industrial system, whether it operates in a socialist economy, a mixed economy, or a capitalist economy. And if industry cannot retain and generate sufficient funds as a result of its operations and replace old plant and machinery, then you'll whistle in vain for the investment and we shall continue to slide downhill. These are elementary facts of life. They're known to every trade unionist. Who would they sooner go and negotiate with when they want an increase in pay? A firm that's bankrupt or a firm that's doing well and generating a good surplus? The primary concern of our industrial strategy and our economic policy for the next 3 years is quite simple. The strategy and the priority is to create more wealth, and to do it with the agreement and the support of the trade union movement. Our social policy is concerned with the distribution of wealth. These two aspects of policy shouldn't be regarded as being in conflict, nor should we put them in conflict with each other. They must be harmonised. The wealth must be created before it's distributed. This is where I believe a misunderstanding, or perhaps something worse, has arisen between the government and the party on the question of public expenditure. You know we've been not creating sufficient wealth as fast as we've been distributing it. Over the last 3 years, you know that our domestic product has risen by 2%, and the increase in our public expenditures, including central and local government, has increased by 18%. We've made shift to meet this, yes. Higher taxation at some points, borrowing from abroad, yes, and worst of all, printing money. Now we've got to get back into balance again. Of course, it can't be done in 12 months. Our creditors understand this. Those with whom we discuss these matters in other countries understand this, because the disruption would be too great for the social system to bear. But it would be folly to continue to borrow at the present rate of £10 billion a year, even if we could find the lenders. And we're not always very polite to them. Whatever we do in the short term, the only long-term cure for unemployment is to create a healthy manufacturing industry that will hold its own overseas, and in doing so will then certainly be able to retain its grip on the domestic market. It's from a healthy and expanding manufacturing industry that we shall be able in due course to resume the growth and improvement of our social services, and also create the jobs that are necessary if we are to reach what we all desperately require, our full employment targets. Like everyone in the labour movement, like everyone, I believe in a high level of public expenditure. But I part company with those who believe that we can rely indefinitely on foreign borrowing to provide for greater social expenditure, a better welfare service, better hospitals, better education, the renewal of our inner cities, and all tomorrow. In the end, these things, comrades, will only be provided by our own efforts. Of course, a Labour government must not and will not stand by and do nothing about unemployment except wait for this agreed industrial strategy to succeed. As regards selective import controls, which was raised yesterday by a number of delegates, let me say that whether they're introduced or whether it's right to introduce them or not has very little to do with socialist philosophy. It's a matter of calculating where we get the biggest advantage. After all, I grew up in the days when import controls were the remedy of the Conservative government. So it's nothing to do with socialism. It's a question of where do we get the best advantage. Already, various ways of controlling imports exist in a number of fields. We shall continue to examine them case by case, and I am already publicly committed to discuss the particular problem of Japanese imports with the European heads of state when we meet at The Hague in November. There will be a constant dialogue, I promise you, between the TUC and the CBI, the government and the party on this matter, and action will be taken where it can be shown that it is to our net advantage. There is no philosophical block of any sort about that. Mr. Chairman, comrades, in recent weeks, as some of you know, I visited the North East. I've been to Glasgow, I've been to Merseyside, I've been to the West Midlands. I've listened to some pretty straight talking about unemployment. I accept the criticism, but I say in reply that there are no soft options, nor will a generation of decline in British industry be reversed by gimmicks. That is why, in asking for the movement's support for our present industrial strategy, I ask for more than your loyalty. That can be eroded. Indeed, I can understand the circumstances in which it is. What the government needs, what we all need, is for your understanding and for the conviction that will follow that understanding. And then let there be a determination to go out into the workshops, to go to the streets, to be on the doorsteps, and to explain with passion to others why this is the only way for our movement and for our country. We've a duty to fight for it. If we follow it, in the end we shall save not only our party, not only our government, but we shall save our country. Mr. Chairman, whilst our policy is working through, we've embarked on a succession of schemes aimed at alleviating unemployment, wherever and whenever we can do so within the context of the overall strategy. In particular, I emphasise, as Elbert Booth did yesterday, and other delegates as well, the need to try to alleviate the problem of youth unemployment. Unemployment at any age is unacceptable, but for a school leaver it is especially demoralising, and those who leave at the minimum age of 16 need special help. Talking to educators, as I have done, and on the other side to employers who take on the school leavers, it's been put to me very strongly by both that there is still a real lack of contact between them both. The machinery does exist to provide this. It should be used in a more urgent and positive way. Two-way communication between schools, careers advisors and employers must be a continuous process with full cooperation on both sides. The importance of hard thinking about this difficult transition that our young people make from the world of school to the world of work can't be exaggerated. Much has been done and is now being done through the Work Experience programme and the great increase in the number of places provided for vocational training. There was a shaft of light last week with the fall in the number of unemployed young people. We expect this trend to continue. In addition, let me rehearse the other measures, the job creation programme, the temporary employment subsidy, the remarkable increase in places for training, the work experience programme, which came into force on 21st of September, the youth employment subsidy, which comes into operation on 1st of October. All these are helping to alleviate a serious problem. And then last Thursday, Albert Booth announced the job release scheme in assisted areas to begin on the 1st of January next, and which will open up new employment opportunities for younger unemployed people seeking work, with the tax-free allowance of £23 a week to full-time men and women in assisted areas who retire and who are within a year of their respective minimum pensionable ages. We should continue with these efforts. We should continue to seek out, with the cooperation of the unions and others, effective means of trying to reduce unemployment by selective action, taking special account of the position of young people. The wide variety of selective measures which we've now brought in will help about 500,000 of those without jobs in this period of exceptionally high unemployment. Travelling round the country, I've been much encouraged to hear from teachers, from social workers, from the young people themselves, from employers, that they value these measures as a very real contribution to the alleviation of this problem. But I repeat, none of these measures, however worthwhile, are a substitute for a thriving economy generating full employment. There is no other way. We are, we always have been, we remain a party of social reform, and far more needs to be done to prepare our young people for the time when they leave school. There should be much closer cooperation between employers and schools, and employers could do more to make their requirements known by teachers. Heads of schools could extend their sphere of interest to obtaining and acting upon the advice of local firms about their requirements. Firms could provide practical help of various kinds to local schools, and so discover how they could make better use of the actual and potential skills of school leavers. Personnel officers in industry could ask teachers to appraise their training techniques in industry. Cooperation in these ways would help industrial and commercial training to flow naturally from the last years at school. And some schools, perhaps rather a lot, need to give their careers departments more serious attention than they have done. I am concerned about the gap that exists at many levels between education and industry today, not only at this level but at other levels too. But let us begin by helping our young people to fit themselves for life in their work as well as in their leisure. And let us also, may I say in passing, take note and take account of the anxiety among parents at some aspects of the education of their children. I've been in a number of schools which have impressed me deeply by their innovation and their experiment. New ways of learning that were unknown to us, vouched for by the teachers. This is good, but let me emphasize that the basic and the greatest gift a teacher can give to a child are the basic tools of learning and a desire for knowledge. A literate and numerate child has the key to open the door of learning and the key to the freedom of the mind. Let me turn to another aspect of our modern society and of freedom. Democratic socialists emphasize that a fundamental aspect of freedom is the freedom of minorities within our society. Freedom from discrimination. There can be no equivocation, and there is none, in the labour movement on racial matters. We must oppose all forms of racial discrimination in this country and fight the messages of hate that are designed messages that are designed to divide people from each other. The party has taken up the challenge. We shall fight it. We shall continue with the way in which we have begun on this particular matter. Once they've been accepted for settlement in our country, every newcomer has the same rights and obligations, both as everyone else. We wish them to make as real a contribution to the country as other immigrants have done throughout our long history. And the new Race Relations Bill currently before Parliament aims to help them do that. As to numbers, the numbers who come here, I've never wavered from the view that in a small and highly populated country there's a limit to the number of immigrants we can absorb. Therefore, strict control over immigration is necessary, subject to honouring our commitments, and Britain will do that. Next, a word about devolution, an important constitutional development which we will be discussing later this morning and to which Michael Foot will be replying. And will you allow me to say how deeply I appreciate the support of Michael, who, in the interests of the unity of our movement and our party, has put aside all his personal feelings in order to help our party and me in particular. The debate on devolution will go on. It is going on now. But it can't continue indefinitely without being brought to a conclusion. Therefore, we shall ask Parliament next session to enact the necessary legislation so that our proposals will be on the statute book in the course of 1977. Parliament will have plenty of time to debate the bill, but Parliament owes it to the people of Scotland and Wales to reach a definite and a favourable conclusion on the matter. At the end of the process, Parliament must be able to offer the people of Scotland and of Wales a real and substantial measure of control over our own affairs within the overall framework of the United Kingdom. Our own affairs, I speak as the member for Cardiff. What we will not create, what our government will not create, is a halfway house to separation, to which the vast majority of the people in these islands are totally and completely opposed. I've been around a long time. Some of you will think too long. But my political instinct tells me that the successful implementation of devolution offers us, as a whole, the best way of keeping the United Kingdom united, while at the same time enhancing the vigour of national diversity within these islands. I know that these proposals have raised problems and questions in the minds of our local authority members in the English regions. Yes, we shall look at those with some care. I know some of them arise because of the disillusionment with the expensive and bureaucratic local government structure foisted on us by the last Tory administration. As to the continuing tragedy of Northern Ireland, I'm sure the whole conference would like me to express our heartfelt thanks and admiration to Merlin Rees for the way he's carried out his responsibilities in the last 4 months. Roy Mason has now inherited this awesome task. He will carry to the hard-pressed people of Northern Ireland the same message that the government will use its best endeavours to put an end to the violence and to achieve a political solution. Let me repeat, because some things have to be said time after time after time. There will be no economic and no political withdrawal. The situation has been improved by stopping the use of detention in Northern Ireland. What is now needed is a rigorous determination by everyone that the rule of law shall prevail there and that no one shall be exempt. In that, the government needs the full cooperation of all the people themselves, and this has recently been illustrated by the spontaneous women's peace movement, which I much welcome. And let us not forget in this forum another group which has maintained a consistent non-sectarian stand throughout all these difficult years. I refer to the Northern Ireland trade unions. They too have refused to be intimidated. We make clear once again to the men of violence that we are not to be intimidated into abandoning our duty to all the people of that province. Mr. Chairman and comrades, without preempting our debate next Thursday, I'd like to mention briefly some recent developments in Southern Africa. The announcement on Friday evening by Mr. Smith of his acceptance of the principle of majority rule within the 2-year time scale that I laid down on 22nd of March last could be an historic turning point in the future of the subcontinent. For Britain, a solution in Rhodesia on the basis of majority rule is a debt of honour. For Africa, without it, there is a constant threat to peace and to stability. I'd like to put on record my thanks to Secretary Kissinger for his characteristic and remarkable contribution to recent developments. Without the decisive intervention of the United States, there would not have been this turnabout in the attitude of Mr. Smith. In the last few days, I've been in contact with the 4 African presidents who have themselves made a massive contribution to the search for a peaceful settlement. Their response to Mr. Smith's broadcast last Friday has been a tough one. That's not surprising, considering the history and considering the suspicion that arises from the history. But the prize within our grasp is an interim government with a black majority and majority rule within 2 years. That must be preferable to an increasingly violent armed struggle in which thousands of innocent men and women on both sides will lose their lives. The Labour government wants to see an interim government set up rapidly, say within 4 to 6 weeks. We'll play a full and active part in promoting such an end. The meeting to negotiate the interim government need not necessarily be held in Salisbury or elsewhere in Rhodesia. The Foreign Secretary, Tony Crosland, is prepared to back the convening of negotiations in any place convenient to the parties concerned, but the essential ingredient is the rapid establishment of the interim government. Once that has happened, there will be no going back. The die will then be cast. There'll be difficulties in the months ahead, but if the forthcoming negotiations can be brought to a successful conclusion, then Britain will have at long last discharged her last colonial responsibility in Africa with honour. The borders of our movements concerned have never been drawn at Dover. When the government is attacked about cuts in public expenditure at a time of great economic difficulty, let me remind Conference, what has not so far been mentioned, that the government left untouched our aid programme to the poorer countries, and we have in no way withdrawn from any of our responsibilities to them. We still take upon ourselves the task of assisting those who are burdened, the 2/3 of mankind who are burdened by poverty, ignorance and disease. I regret that some of the momentum that was opened up at the dialogue by Harold Wilson at the Commonwealth Prime Ministers' Conference has been lost for the time being. I believe this will not persist. We will do all in our power to ensure that the response of the industrialised world in the North-South dialogue is a constructive one. And we shall also use our influence to promote a more constructive dialogue in East-West relations in the search for increased international security. Incidentally, we shouldn't assume, that we are alone in our troubles. Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union have their economic problems too. We wish to see an expansion of economic activity in East-West trade. I do not accept the arguments of those who say that such a growth will serve only to assist the expansion of Soviet armed strength. There's no doubt that the Soviet Union has built substantial armed forces. But nevertheless, our analysis is, and this is accepted by a great many people outside this country, that the development of economic relations can increasingly involve the Soviet Union in a more stable and beneficial relationship with the West, which it will not be in their interest to disturb. This is the policy of détente. And as signatories to the Helsinki Agreement, we regard it as essential that its implications should be accepted in all the fields without exception, not only economic relations, but also cultural exchanges and human relations as well. We have in common with the Soviet Union the desire to avoid the horrors of war. We proceed on the assumption that the Soviet Union is in earnest in its wish to improve relations between states, I emphasize the word states, even though, as their own statements have told us, the ideological struggle will continue between parties. And let there be no doubt about their intentions on that. Now, finally, I've taxed your patience. Let me turn to our domestic affairs. By that, I mean our party affairs. In the media, I'm often dubbed a party man. Indeed, it seems to be about the worst possible thing the media can say about you, is that you're loyal to the party. Well, I accept the description as an accolade. I'm only too well aware that the strength of this government rests on the party, and without the party, none of us would be holding the offices we do. That is why I want the closest possible relationship between party and government, but it must be based on a mutual respect and a recognition of each other's responsibilities. To tell the truth, I believe the relationship which has grown up between the TUC and the government in the last 2.5 years has developed faster than the relationship between the government and the National Executive Committee. This shouldn't be so. This shouldn't be so. It's not of my seeking. Every member of the Cabinet, every member of the government knows that he shares a responsibility to establish close relations with the National Executive Committee and its study groups, as well as with the parliamentary party itself. I don't want to retreat behind the stock defence that the government must govern if that becomes a polite way of telling the party to go to hell. But the NEC must remember too that they are responsible. Yes, they're responsible for their statements and their resolutions. But the government is accountable for its actions, and that's the difference between us. And we are accountable in a parliamentary democracy to Parliament. Parliamentary candidates who offer themselves to the electorate on the basis that they're willing to suspend their judgment in favour of extra-parliamentary bodies, whoever they may be, will receive short shrift from the electorate. Of course, members of Parliament must be sensitive to the views of their general management committees. And I tell you they are. I know that from when they come and talk to me about the attitudes of their own GMCs. There is a two-way traffic goes on between the two. Of course they are influenced, but members of Parliament have to take decisions by their votes. That is where they are responsible. There are many aspects of our party democracy that could be looked at with advantage. Is the party really satisfied with a youth movement which has only half the branches it had 10 years ago and which is increasingly dominated by a single brand of socialist sectarianism? Could not the National Executive Committee itself reflect the party better if it included local government representatives and perhaps representatives of the regional councils? I also draw the party's attention to a new factor creeping into the party that I warn against, namely those elements who misuse the word socialist and who seek to infiltrate our party and use it for their own ends. They're almost always recognisable by their jargon and by their intolerance. They are as much the enemy of the Tribune Group as they are of the Manifesto Group. Or even of the great majority of us who don't happen to belong to either, but are simply ordinary members of the party. The main bulwark. I thought I might catch a tiddler or two. The main bulwark against this infiltration is a strong and active membership in every constituency, for these people represent only a small group. But I do suggest to the National Executive Committee that they could do well to examine these activities, see what is going on, and report back to the party. I raise these matters not because I'm on a witch hunt, but because I want the government and the party to work closely together. To do that, the party must be strong and representative. Much good work is already being done. I very much welcome Labour's programme 1976. It's involved the work of hundreds of volunteers, as well as members of the National Executive Committee and our hard-working staff at Transport House. I'm sure that neither they nor you will expect the government, dealing as we have to with the day-to-day realities of our situation, to simply swallow whole and undigested the 147 pages of Labour's programme of 1976. A dialogue will be necessary, and it won't just be carried on by monthly resolutions or a steady stream of press releases from the National Executive subcommittees. To be successful, it will require mutual respect, mutual trust, a recognition of our differing roles and our separate responsibilities. That is my desire, and it's in that spirit that I invite the National Executive to join us in government in planning ahead. If we can approach it in this way, the government will be more sensitive to the party's wishes, and the party's deliberations will have a sharper cutting edge from being more closely involved in the realities of decision-making. We began as a party of protest. We must never lose that, never forget it. There are many ills and many evils in the condition of our society that have still to be remedied, but we are more. We are now a party of government, a party which has put many of the aspirations of the pioneers on the statute book as the law of our land. I conclude my report. It's inevitably I've dealt with many varied issues and problems, some of them, I regret to say, in not as detailed a way as I would like. But Derek Gladwin said to me last night, keep it down as short as you can. I hope what I would like to emerge from it is that the government is willing to tell the people the truth, willing to consult with the party, willing to work with the trade unions and with the people to solve our national problems. That's the philosophy of the social contract. Don't listen to the faint hearts. Have confidence. This Labour movement has the responsibility. Now let it prove that it has the maturity to lead our country and our party to a new future.